Nosferatus, Amenmon, Kanda. Alright, that was the first of the passages, which make the evil thing of the flesh. There's still the second passage, though, which is... Sorry, I just like stating the obvious. Anyway, Kandar, Amotus, Kandar, Sig, Arato, Revoltum, Die, Ererum, Uzanum, Nosferatos, Amenmon, Macazam, Garrus. Crap. Alright. Now for the source of all my misery. Well, at least that's over with. Hello, YouTube. So today we'll be looking at Evil Dead from 2013. This is a kind of sequel remake of the original Evil Dead, and it's a very decisive one on that. There are many different sides for this film, and some people are for it, some people are against it. So before we actually get into where I stand on that, and just my thoughts of it overall, let's talk about the history of it. Raimi, Campbell, and Tappert decided that Fede Alvarez should direct, with this being his first feature film, after seeing his short film Panic Attack, and because he was the only one who pitched it without Ash, which Bruce was happy with since he didn't want to recast the character just yet. They also produced it, gave advice, and oversaw the filming as a show of confidence about the project. There's lots of freedom on set because of this, and it was only until the MPAA gave it an NC-17 that it had to be toned down a little. This is it toned down, by the way, because while the crew was fine with it, the studio wanted it to get a wider release. Alvarez had a background with CGI, but because of what the original was able to pull off, he decided to do most of the effects practically. This version is far more gory than the original, with 70,000 gallons of fake blood being used, as opposed to the original's 300. In order to keep the blood consistent, the film was mostly shot chronologically. The end credit scene with Ash was going to serve as a lead-in to a crossover between him and Mia, but Universal didn't like the idea, and the TV series was a bit of a nail in the coffin, since it would have been hard to work around the continuity. That doesn't mean that a sequel isn't possible, though, as Alvarez has stated that they just haven't come up with a good story for one yet. Fans of the series have been harsh on it, not just because it's a remake, but also because it's so different in tone than what's come to be expected. Others say it goes back to the roots, puns are fun, of the franchise, and is more like what Raimi could have made if he had a bigger budget. So where do I stand on it? Is it good as its own thing, or better yet, does it live up to the original? Well, let's get into it and find out. A group of friends go to a cabin in the woods to help one of them, Mia, kick her drug addiction after a near-fatal overdose. Like others before them, though, they read from the Necronomicon, and an evil force is unleashed, which begins picking them off one by one. Like many other films after the first Evil Dead, this one takes the core idea and expounds on it. Everything from the original is given more weight here, even the reason why they go to the cabin, as it isn't just a party, now it's also to save a friend from making a potentially fatal decision. And since we follow Mia for a good portion of the movie, they also get to play around a bit with a psychological approach to the horror. A lot of what happens to her can and is explained by her just wanting to leave, and I really wanted to enjoy this. Unfortunately, they show in the first 5 minutes that that isn't the case. Seriously, why do they do that? They were gonna play around with this a little bit, but they decided to already let you know, yeah, nope, totally demons. Sorry if you're thinking something else. I mean, yeah, okay, most of the people that are gonna go see this are Evil Dead fans, so we already know that's the case, but if you're gonna do it anyway, at least, stay consistent with it. Then there's the violence, which is way more intense than the original. A lot of it is practical, which is really awesome, but it also lives up to the expectation of the original, as The Evil Dead was seen as a bit of a video nasty for a long time, so much gratuitous gore is to be expected, and it delivers on that. So much so that the MPAA made them darken every scene with gore in it to avoid an NC-17. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like they did that to the rest of the movie too, just to be consistent, which I get. I mean, I'm a sucker for continuity too, but it's still pretty annoying as it can be kind of hard to tell what's actually going on, not helped by some kind of spastic editing, which, to be fair to the editing though, there are some very Sam Raimi-esque moments, in particular when David is locking Mia in the cellar for real, like, when he gets out the chains and stuff. Those moments like that really do make it shine. Complaints aside though, it gives any Evil Dead fan what they want in the gore department. Now on to the biggest mixed bag to me, and that would be the horror. Like I said before, it takes a bit of a psychological approach to it, which is interesting, and all the violence makes it feel a bit like a body horror film, which is awesome. But then the problem comes in the form of the Deadites. How they'll stop at nothing, and all the mutilation that they do is creepy, but a lot of what made them special is gone. Something I always liked about the Deadites is how they taunted their victims. They like to play with those that they tortured, and they really like to use who they were possessing to do that. That isn't present here. The closest that we get is Mia, but all the others are completely silent, and I really do wish that we got to see that a little bit more, as that's what keeps them away from being just some generic demons. Another reason is that the Deadites have a goal in this one. Before, they were random. You never really knew if they were just going to annoy you or attack, and that gave them a lot of unpredictability. Here, though, they're trying to perform a ritual to awaken an ancient evil, which, I mean, weren't the Deadites already an ancient evil? I mean, I'm just saying, they come from they were around in the medieval era. Does that make them not an ancient evil, or is there a much older evil that they're trying to awaken? But, yeah, like, it's even written down in the Necronomicon what steps they have to perform for this. So, like, I guess one Deadite just forgot it and was like, you know what, I'm just gonna write it down, so this doesn't happen again. But here's the thing. The protagonists have that book, not the Deadites. So that means that at a certain point, they can just look in the book and see exactly what their next step is, or at the very least see a step that they could perform here. So at a certain point, you can just prepare to stop them, and the only thing that's really random is the order that they go about that. But all that can be forgiven if what it builds up to is worth it, right? Unfortunately, it isn't. What we get is the Harbinger for the Ancient Evil. Not the Ancient Evil itself, no, it's Harbinger. Which, I mean, I guess they could be saving for a sequel or something whenever that happens, but I don't know, to me it just sort of seems like the Ancient Evil was just too lazy to come out today, so it just sent its girlfriend or something, and yeah, so is the Harbinger at least worth it? Is it something that looking upon it even will just drive one insane? Nope, it's just some naked chick who can burn things. That's it. The horror? I don't know, is this supposed to be scary? I mean, she's just as unrelenting as all the other Deadites. She just sort of feels like the same amount of lackeyness to her. That's kind of it. There's nothing really overly unique or scary about her. I mean, I guess when she gets the machete, it's kind of creepy, as that looked really painful. Seriously, she just like cuts into the wood and then just drags it out. No concern as to what's on the other end. And that part was intense, but other than that, I just was never really scared of her. And all the Deadites in this movie just sort of feel like some really weird cult within the Deadites' ranks instead of what we've come to be used to from them. And I feel like that's where this movie really went wrong. Because a lot of what is done before it, and before the whole entire ritual thing at the very end, is really good. And even the climax is awesome. But it feels like there's more going on here, and that there's a bit more story and actual horror from this ancient evil that we just never really get to see. This movie does a lot of things well, most notably it building off of what's been previously established with this series. However, the problem is that I feel like in some aspects a little bit of it is too predictable, either in that the horror is literally written down, or that, well, a lot of it is just sort of retreading what's been done throughout the franchise, which I didn't really mention because to me that just sort of means that if we do get that sequel someday, then it'll just be completely new material, unless if it draws from the TV show, but I doubt it. So it can be an opportunity for it to do a whole lot more, and this is just supposed to be a remake of it, whereas the sequel can embellish on it a whole lot more. But it still feels like there's a lot left to be desired from this movie. I do really wish that they could have filled in the gaps a little bit more. So, for the story, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. As it does a lot of things right, but there are still some minor problems I had with it, which I can't ignore. But are the characters any better? Let's get into them and find out. So for the characters, let's start off with the most important one of all. Ash. Yeah, he's not really important in this one, but he does get a small cameo at the end credits where he just turns to the camera and says groovy. It's pretty much just that, and I kind of like seeing as sort of Bruce's sign of approval for the movie, even if it was supposed to be a lead-in to a crossover that we unfortunately never got. It's just kind of really cool to me. So, yeah, let's actually go into characters who are actually important to the story here, starting with David. He's likable, as a lot of the movie is him trying to make up for his mistakes in the past. The most notable being him leaving his little sister to take care of their ill and dying mother all on her own, which is kind of a dick move, honestly, but we can tell that he really regrets actions like this, and he's really been trying to be the brother that he never was. Because of this, he can be a pretty likable protagonist, and also is willing to make some more harder decisions than his original movie counterpart. Yeah, if it's not already pretty obvious, he's supposed to be the stand-in for Ash, and that makes what ends up happening to him even more surprising. I've mentioned before how much I like how this movie sort of twists expectations, and that's definitely still prominent here as David ends up dying and Mia ends up being the one to save the day. I just sort of really love little stuff like that, and it's just really awesome that they're still doing that. Eric is also pretty likable to me. He's a Scott stand-in, only in that, well, he's the only other guy there, and he's the one who unleashes the evil. Other than that, he's very much his own character, although I'd personally like to think of him as Scott if he was a bit more mature. He starts off very aggressive to David, as he was his best friend, and him leaving hit him pretty hard. Over the course of the events, though, we see that he never really hated him, and even sacrifices his own life to save him. It sort of brings his character full circle, and I really liked seeing how it was done. We also see a little bit of an interest in mythology with him, which I think gives a little bit more to him. Mia is probably the most fleshed out character in the whole movie. We get to see how much taking care of her mother and losing David really affected her. We also get to see a determined, weak, and sort of vulnerable, but also a sort of spiritual side to her that makes her turn from Deadite to hero very believable. She's a very complex and interesting character, and I wouldn't mind seeing more from her in the future. Olivia is just alright. It was a bit hard for me to pin down which character from the original she was supposed to be similar to, as both her and Natalie share qualities of Linda and Shelley. Ultimately, though, I think that she's supposed to be a bit more Shelley because she's a touch cynical sometimes, and she's the second one to get possessed and is killed by Eric, who, as I mentioned before, is kind of a Scott stand-in. However, there is a bit more to her than that, as we get to see that her and David did seem to have a past, although we only really get to infer about that, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to help out Mia. However, if I were to bring up a complaint about her, it's that there seems to be more going on with her character, but she dies before we really get to go into it. Natalie is easily the most bland character in this, which is probably why I think that she's the most like Linda here. She is nice and in love with David, although she does have a little bit more to her than that, though, as she does seem to be in shock for a lot of the movie, and she does have a bit of backbone, in particular after she cuts off her own arm, which is kind of nice. However, she just sort of feels very out of place with the group, which I get is the point, but it also makes her feel a bit of a fish out of water here. And the characters are a bit of a mixed bag, but for the most part are very well done. They took the basics from the original and expounded on them and gave them much more depth. And I really liked that. There were characters that should be really bland and generic that still have just enough character to at least make them fairly interesting. And they're likable modern-day horror movie protagonists. I really like saying stuff like that, and it's a real shame that I don't get to say it often enough. So, yeah, I really do like the characters in this, so I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10. Also, I went in an order that makes all their names spell out a demon, or just demon if we take away Ash. So, yeah, I really like that this movie did that. I don't know, I think it's just kind of a nice little detail there, which I think just sort of adds a little bit more to this. So, for this movie overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It expounds on the story and characters of the original in interesting ways, while still being its own thing. But the horror has its downsides, and some of the characters aren't as fleshed out as they could be. I still enjoy it as its own thing, though, and I think that it did just as much right, maybe even a little bit more so, than it did wrong. So, for this movie overall, I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. And next time we'll be celebrating my 4-year anniversary in a bit of a different way. Normally, I look at something Ghost Rider related, but, kind of all out of those right now, unless if, I don't know, I look at that one season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which, to be technical, I've already looked at, so, yeah, we're gonna have to pass on Ghost Rider and go into a bit of a different territory with another hero born out of Hellfire, that being Hellboy. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Bye. Oh, come on. What's it take to get rid of this thing? Ah!
Hey.
Hi.
What the hell?
It's actually a bit of a long story.
I got some time. So that's pretty much it. What are you gonna do with the Necronomicon?
Oh, I have a plan.
So, are you gonna tell me?
Oh, yeah, we're going to Rendra.
Do I have to come?
Yes.
Ugh. Okay, did we really have to drive all this way just to bury it?
Yeah, it's the only place that can't cause any more problems, and if it tries, well, at least knows how to deal with evil.
Can we just go to the movie theater already?
Oh yeah, that is why you came over here. Yeah, okay.
Fucking finally!